so this is our first episode. This is episode 1, and it is the top 8 things that helped me get and stay sober for the last 2 years. Today I am 2 years sober, and I honestly couldn't be happier about it. It has been the biggest change in my life that I've ever experienced. I went from being extremely unhappy, having daily panic attacks, doing all the things that people who are addicted to alcohol do, like drinking too much, obviously. I really didn't like myself at all. I didn't hate myself. I kind of hated myself. Yeah, I did actually. If you think that you're addicted to alcohol and you want to stop, you will need to stop drinking alcohol in some way, shape, or form. For me, I just went cold turkey, and that's a story for another day. But from that point on, I needed to do some shit to stay sober, and I didn't go to detox either. I took 4 weeks off of work. 2 weeks had already been planned because I was getting married later that month. Another story for another time. My dad is a recovering alcoholic. Recovering alcoholic is the term that he uses for himself. Same with my grandfather. I don't identify with those words. I identify as someone who experienced addiction for a finite amount of time, and now I went through recovering from it, and now I am recovered from an addiction. And that doesn't mean that I'm gonna go back to this point where I was using, because I don't want to, first of all, and that's not the person that I want to be. I'm over here and looking to the future. That isn't even a factor anymore. There's nothing about alcohol that entices me. It's lost its magic. It's gone. I don't you know what has its magic? Lemon water. Lemon water is so underrated. Some things came really innately to me, like this first one, and other things I had to learn. Ghosting gets such a bad rap. I have been a person who, when shit gets hard, I have ghosted in the past, and in the past that's served me not very well, because that's not a really good way to deal with shit, because you're not dealing with it, you're just running away. But in the case of my early recovery or sobriety, I needed that. I had to physically remove myself from the people and things and places that I could no longer be in, because I could not physically be in a bar. I couldn't go to, so for example, I have a story. My second week of sobriety, some of my friends, the folks that I had been drinking with really the most, especially towards the end there, invited me for a dinner party, and I had told them, I'm trying to not drink, and they said, oh, no, it's fine. And so I came over, and there were bottles of wine. One of my friends is a sommelier, so it was just literally bottles of wine passing my face throughout the night. So I went into the bathroom, had a panic attack, decided to just suck it up, because at the time I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know how to say no to people or things. And I was like, okay, I'll just get through this, and I'll just reevaluate the role of alcohol and people in my life, which ended up being really painful. I'm not gonna lie, ghosting the things that I was so used to doing and the people that were attached to those things, activities, drinking in bars or sitting in a house and drinking while people around me did drugs, that was a very normal environment for me to be in. So I ghosted the things that I didn't go to bars anymore. I didn't go to parties anymore. I didn't hang out with the people that I used to use with, because we actually never really hung out outside of using together, which is kind of a first sign that relationship or friendship wasn't built on strong foundations. And then I replaced a lot of things with new things, and I'll talk about those new things. So number seven is social media. So I used social media in the beginning because when you don't have any more friends, you have nowhere to go, and you're just sitting in your fucking house, being well, what do I do now? Social media is obviously what we all turn to, and you're here now, so welcome, come on in. This is my gift to you. And all the people on social media I found who were sharing their stories about sobriety and recovery and really making it an accessible thing, where I felt so much less alone when I found all of the amazing sobriety tags, the hashtags on Instagram, and not a lot of video, which is kind of why I'm doing this, because I realize not many people are getting on camera and talking about their stories like this in an upbeat setting, right? It was hard. I'm not gonna lie, it was really painful at times to get sober, but I'm living my dream life right now because of it. So it's possible, you can get out, you can stop doing it, you can, move forward. Social media connected me to so many people across the world. I read a book called Control Alcohol. It's by Annie Grace, and it's not woo, it's just very straightforward in that you need to help reprogram your brain. Your brain has been programmed up until a certain point in terms of like attitudes and beliefs and social conditioning about alcohol and the role it plays in your life, or what everyone thinks it should play in your life. Part of your job in recovering or questioning your relationship with alcohol is to identify and remove the messages that you don't want anymore in terms of alcohol. It's pretty simple. Like, all I had to do was go on my feed and just see how many people and pages and tags and like with the shit that I was following that was glorifying alcohol or glorifying being stuck and like being stuck in a victim loop, and just like I audited my social media, I unfollowed all the shit that I didn't want to be, and I thought to myself, like, I don't feel this way right now. I felt like shit. Like, I'm just gonna be real with you. I felt like shit. I did not feel like happy and woo and positive and all this shit. Like, my brain chemistry was so messed up because I had been using this substance that was fucking with it for so many years. And I was like, okay, well, logically it makes sense that if all the messages I'm inputting into my mind are negative, I'm gonna not feel better. Like logically, it's not gonna make me feel good to be receiving negative messages. So I took all of the negative messages out of my feed, and I just put new, positive, like lovely, all the shit that I wanted to be, that I didn't feel, but that I was aspiring to be like, I put into my feed. So I followed like all sorts of people who are sober and talking about how sobriety and not drinking is like your superpower, and how it's actually really rebellious to not drink in this society. And as someone, maybe you can agree, as someone who's like this artist type, like, I mean, you can see I have naked women in the background. Like, I create things that are subversive, and and of course, like a nude female body is subversive. But anyway, whatever, that's it. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, it is, because everyone's drinking, and if I'm not drinking, that makes me different and outside. And like, I really liked being a black sheep. Anyway, books and podcasts. So there are tons of books that I will share with you in the description. Annie Grace, she wrote a book called Control Alcohol, and that book changed my life. I'm not gonna lie. It was an amazing read for me at the point when I really needed that kind of reassurance that it was right to question my relationship with alcohol, and it would be positive. It would be a great change. There are podcasts that I listen to, like that I binge listen to. What a word to use, but that's what I did. I binged on podcasts my first 4 weeks of sobriety, when I was literally doing nothing but trying to keep myself sober. And I wasn't doing nothing. That's a really big job, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. One was called Home. It was by Laura McCowan and Holly Whitaker. They have since stopped doing that podcast, which is, cool. We all, whatever, our projects end. But that podcast really helped me get through early recovery, because here are two women who are kind of close in my age. Holly especially, she worked in tech, and I still work in tech, and I was just like, yes, here's a modern woman who's talking about what it's like to be sober, and I felt like they had experienced what I had experienced, and so it was super important to me to listen to those stories that they would tell, and just they were super honest and raw about it. And I was like, whoa, this is cool, people sharing their truth, and I'm so just motivated by it, which is why I'm here now, because I know the impact that their stories and them just putting themselves out there had on me, and I'm forever grateful. And then there are other women that I followed too. Africa Brooke, she's a super sex positive Londoner, and she preaches about self-love and raising your standards and holding yourself to high standards, and she's a super liberated woman, and she talks a lot about sex positivity and sobriety, and it's just a really cool mix of two worlds that I'm very interested in. So if you want a sexy addition to your feed, I highly recommend Africa Brooke. She's amazing. So 5, we're on 5 now. My fifth thing or whatever that helped me get and stay sober for the last 2 years is fitness. My first two weeks of sobriety are kind of a blur, and I think by the end of the second week I was like, I have to move my body, I have to do something to get out of it and be really present. And I was trying to meditate, and I was trying, like, dude, the first 2 weeks were such a blur. I was miserable. My brain, I was literally detoxing from a substance that I had been ingesting daily for years. And that is a very hard job. With fitness, it felt like when I was working out, when I was going to hot yoga and sweating all that shit out, and eventually later on, I ended up going to boxing, which was highly recommend for people who are in recovery because you get so much aggression out, dude. Like, it's the best. You're punching shit, you're like taking your clothes off, and you're just like in a sports bra. I felt like, honestly, I would put my hair and like braid it into pigtails, and I would feel like $1 Million Baby, and I'd be like, yeah, fuck yeah, okay, and it was so fun. So I would go to Bikram yoga and sweat. I would go to title boxing and sweat. I would go to the gym in my building when I finally went back to work, because I work in tech and a gym membership was a perk. They paid for it, and which is great. Like, take advantage of that shit if you have it, and if you don't, find, like, I don't know, a $20 Globo gym. Like, just move your fucking body, like, go for a walk. There's literal science that shows, you know, if you can go for a walk, if you can't, like, I'm not trying to be ableist here, if you can, it's just about like doing what you're able to do to somehow move your body. At least for me, fitness was just such an important part of my recovery, and it still is. Like, when I have a bad day, yesterday for example, I was having a bad day. I couldn't solve this problem I was working on. I was really frustrated, and I went up to the gym in my building, because I have one now, and I rode 4,000 meters. I put on some like music that makes me feel like sexy and good, and I rode, and I got the endorphin hit I needed, and I felt better. Like, I was able to go from a really shitty place and like move myself to a better one, because just from the simple act of moving my body, which I do that all the time now. It's just a tool in my self-care toolkit, is to take responsibility, to be aware of what's happening. Like, first of all, I have to be aware that I'm having a shitty day. I have to accept that I'm having a shitty day and not be like, well, whatever, I'm just gonna ignore these feelings. Like, no, I accept it. I'm like, okay, yes, checking in, I'm having a bad day, what can I do about it? Because it's my responsibility. It's not anyone else's responsibility to make sure you're good. Like, it's all on you, dude. I'm sorry, but it is. I'm not sorry, because actually you have the total power to heal yourself and to be okay and to be more than okay. You've got, like, it's all within you. It's not outside of you. Number 4 is one of my most favorite things, is doing anything that you possibly need to do to keep your sobriety baby alive. You are the mother, like, big you, and then your sobriety, this thing you're nursing, whatever. But this, because like, I'm just not imagining a baby, I'm imagining like a blob. Keep your sobriety baby alive, and you are the baby. Like, your job is to keep yourself alive and not using. So I learned this concept of permission slips in therapy, and we'll talk about my therapist in a minute. Shout out to Dre, she's the best. Permission slips are things you give yourself to give yourself permission to do shit that maybe you would never have done in the past. It's for people who have no to low self-esteem, or for people who do have high self-esteem. Like, I have high self-esteem now, and I still need to say, like, oh, I really don't want to go to this thing. I give myself permission not to go to the thing. Like, it's that simple. But now that's a much quicker thing I can do for myself. But at the time, it was just like, say no to people? What? Okay. No, like, I couldn't do that. My whole identity was rooted in people pleasing, or just not giving a fuck what anyone else thought. There was that, like, giving a fuck, but not giving a fuck. Like, it was just this weird cycle of narcissism, I think is what they call it, where you really desperately care what other people think, but then you act like you don't, which is just super shitty for everyone involved. So I'm happy to say I'm a recovering narcissist. I mostly just had really low self-esteem, and so I have, like, a lot of compassion for my old self. She was just a really like, sad, messed up human, and that's okay. Like, I needed to go through all of that to get to this point where I feel amazing and I have everything I wanted in life and more now. But keeping your sobriety baby alive is your number one job right now if you're in early recovery, and you can say no to things. You do not have to go anywhere that you don't want to do. This is all about stopping, checking in with yourself, and giving yourself permission to listen to yourself if you don't want to do something. It's really simple. It doesn't matter the reason. All that matters is if something inside you says, I don't want to do that because I'm trying to keep my sobriety baby alive, and that's not in line with that. Like, that doesn't match up for me. It's okay. Like, you might lose people, like friends. The friends that I still have are people who totally understood and made space for me while I was going through this transformation, and just like loved and respected me, and totally respected every decision that I made for myself, because they themselves have done work to take care of themselves and grow. And hopefully you have people like that in your life, and if you don't, hey, I'm here for you. I see you, and you can choose yourself. That's okay. I give you permission to choose yourself today, whatever that is. Like, if it's not going to a work event, if it's not going to a friend's birthday party, like, oh my God, if I don't go to the birthday party, they'll hate me. Like, no, they won't. If they're your good friend and you say, I'm really struggling and I don't want to be in that environment, and you say no, which is like setting a boundary 101, they should understand. And if they don't, you got to move on, and you got to find people who do, because they're out there, I promise you. Number 3 is journaling. Okay, guys, for like 5 years before I got sober, I thought I was an extrovert, and I am not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. That is why I'm on the other side of this camera, where I can connect with you, hopefully through the camera. You can like feel my energy, but I don't have to actually physically be with you. And eventually I'd like to get on stage and like speak in front of thousands of people. Like, those are my dreams now, where once my dream was to just stay fucking sober and keep my sobriety baby alive. Like, things have morphed, which is really fun. Journaling was something I did when I was like a kid. I would journal from the time I could write, even up until about 15, 16, when shit was just getting really busy. And also I discovered alcohol. Like, I started drinking and I stopped journaling. I can really see a clear line there. It was like someone took over when I started drinking, and no longer did little me, or, you know, the girl at 15, like, her shit didn't matter anymore. It was like, it's time to be adult me, and it's time to like be serious and take yourself seriously, and no more of this daydreaming shit. Like, I always wanted to be a writer. My whole life I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to create things. I wanted to be an artist. And at that point, when it was like the 16, 17 society and the programming from my parents, like, no judgment to them, they were just doing what they thought was right, I started to squash those dreams, like, of being an artist and being a creative who makes things and gets paid or whatever, and focus on going to college. You go to school, you get a good job, you get a 401k, you go to work 9 to 5, you work for companies your parents can quote at dinner parties so that they're proud of you. You know, you work out, you're hot, you're attractive, you marry the right person, you have babies, and you go to cool places on vacation, and you die. Like, that was the track I was on. It's like day 1 of sobriety, I picked up a journal. And it's because I was so in my head. I could not imagine just sitting in my own mind for more than a minute. What I felt, and I use insane very seriously, very deliberately. I felt at the time when I was detoxing from alcohol that my mind was just going insane. And in a way to like cope with that chaos in my brain, because like, imagine I'm just sitting here, and inside my mind is a firestorm of shit. Like, the neurological pathways in my brain are trying to like heal, and I'm trying to like come to terms with all of the trauma, being queer and not being out, being poly and not being out, mostly identity things that I was so sad that I couldn't express, that I drank to hide behind them. So journaling really allowed me to be present and be in myself and express my emotions and express myself for pages and pages and pages and pages, and allow myself to just, I made an agreement with myself when I started journaling again, that I wouldn't filter myself, because I had, up until that point, I felt like I had two people inside of me. I had, or maybe even three. I had the person I outwardly presented to people, the person that was behind that person, who was living a double life, frankly, where I was presenting like this person to my work and to my my family, mostly social media, like pretending I wasn't this person that I actually was, which was queer and poly, and generally not like this monogamous heterosexual persona that I had created for myself and that I hid behind because I'm privileged and I can do that, which isn't cool. It just is. And it was killing me to do that, because really who I was this person. And then over here was like some dark person who really, that's what I really felt. Like, these are the actions, but over here is who what I really felt inside. And that voice, I refused to listen to it for years. Like, she did not, there was a wall here. I did not listen to that voice. And so when I started journaling again, I was like, okay, we're gonna access all levels of yourself, including the dark one. We're gonna let the dark one out of her cage. And thank God, because that's the key to healing from all this shit, is letting the darkness out, looking at it, being like, oh, like, she was just doing the best she could. Like, she was really sad, or she was really fucked up, and she had a lot of shit she was dealing with, and she didn't have the tools. The people around her didn't have the tools. So, like, let's forgive her and the people around her and move on. Like, being able to access the full range of my emotions and my identities was super important to me, and journaling was an act that allowed me to do that while I recovered. Okay, number 2. Number 2, yes. So number 2 is Dr. Dre, Andrea, my therapist. She is amazing. I've never been against therapy. I was in therapy when I was younger. I was in therapy in college. It helped me get out of a very bad relationship and move to Chicago, where I am now. But then somewhere when I moved to Chicago and then hitting the end of addiction and beginning of recovery, I stopped going to therapy. Like, it was a bad time. That relationship ending really messed me up. And when I got to Chicago, I was just like wild and free. Like, she was a crazy girl. She was awesome. I mean, I loved her. She was like a whole new level of freedom that I had never let myself feel before. And it really sped up my addiction. So, learned a lot of lessons. So my first time back in therapy was when I literally barrel rolled into Dre's office, and she's like, I really wish you would detox, not on your own. I was like, fuck, okay. But Dre gave me all the tools I needed to build my self-esteem. She taught me how to forgive myself and others. She taught me that two things can exist at the same time and be completely contradictory. Like, I can forgive the people that hurt me, and including myself, and what they did cannot be okay. Like, those two things can exist, and I can hold space for both of them. And paradoxes can exist. Like, I was very black or white before that. I didn't realize that a paradox is actually a superpower, and the more free I am and the more self-esteem I have, the more I actually really love paradoxes, because it feels like more freedom and more creative. Like, it feels very artistic to have a paradox and to accept it, and actually really sometimes prefer a paradox. But anyway, we're getting really woo here. I highly recommend, if you are attempting to reevaluate your relationship with alcohol in any kind of way, whether it's through sobriety and recovery and like hard line, like I'm not gonna drink anymore because blah, 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 or if it's just like, I wanna think about why I use in the first place. And the really big overarching thing is like, are you living the life that you could be living? And have you created a life where you don't feel like you need to escape from it? And whether that's through alcohol or pot or sex or shopping or blah, 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 like anything we use to numb out and avoid, that's what I view addiction, or just addiction is really an expression of feeling stuck, and like you can't actually do the things you want to do. You don't feel like you have the freedom or the ability to do the things you want to do, and so you cover up the pain, and it hurts because ingesting an addictive substance just compounds all of that because it's addictive. Like literally ingesting it makes your brain crave it again. Like the withdrawal creates a craving, and like that's just how it works. So in order to give yourself the space, removing the substance to see like what you could become, I think that's a really healthy activity to do. Obviously I'm biased, but now that I've done it, and thanks to the help of my therapist who really helped me, dude, guys, I went to therapy weekly, and I still go for the most part weekly, every other week. I think that's why I've been so successful in being sober for 2 years straight with a lot of joy, frankly. Like once I went through a couple of really intense grieving periods, and I know this isn't gonna be the case for everyone, but for me, I felt a lot of relief and joy, and it was even past the pink cloud. Like they talk about a pink cloud when you're in early sobriety, where you're like, oh my God, I'm sober, this is the best thing in the whole world, and it is. And it's also like your brain is kind of fooling you because there's some dark shit that's gonna happen after that, like it just will. But enjoy it while you're in it, because it feels so good. After feeling so bad, it feels so good. And to feel that good without any substances was just like mind-blowing to me. So getting through all of that with the help of a medical professional who is trained to help people work through addiction is super important. You can watch YouTube videos all day long and listen to stories and connect with other people who are sober, but you are dealing with something that requires like a professional help you with it, because it's not easy. And if you are really serious about wanting to be sober and recovering from an addiction, why wouldn't you want to get help? So I was a swimmer, and I didn't know everything about swimming, I just knew that I loved swimming. And I had coaches who would coach me and teach me how to get better at swimming, and they would always share things with me that I'd never really considered, like how to move my body a certain way, or how to breathe a certain way, and how to get faster and get better. And that's what I kind of feel like a therapist is. A therapist is your swim coach, like, but for your brain. And it's awesome, and there's no reason why there should be any stigma, because we go to doctors when we're physically sick. Why wouldn't we go to a doctor or a therapist when we're mentally sick and need help? So no stigma about therapy around here, because I think it's amazing. If you're watching this video and you're really considering trying on sobriety or questioning your relationship with alcohol, therapy. Yeah. Okay, number 1. Spirituality. It's being woo as fuck and being the queer, poly, femme, artist, like woo person that I am. I grew up in a very Christian environment, and it was very difficult because inside I knew that I was not straight. I've always been like high energy, very out there with my sensuality and wanting to connect with people, and I see honestly nothing wrong with it. I think that the body and sexuality are forms of liberation, and using your body and having freedom with it, freedom with your body and your mind, is like a fucking, it's my values. It always has been. And so faced with something that went completely against my values when I was very young, in terms of Christianity, where I was told that I was bad and that people wouldn't love me or respect me if I shared my body, even though I wanted to. I didn't think religion was for me at that point. I was like, religion is whack, it's not. And I didn't know about spirituality at the time. I didn't know that you could have a faith in source or the universe or whatever, something bigger than yourself. And so when I was first in recovery and my brain was going nuts and I couldn't process and I was just like so stuck in myself, I created a little altar in my old apartment. I put like crystals and all sorts of woo shit that I kind of believed in it, you guys, but I needed something. I had to believe that there was a reason for all of my suffering, and that there was someone I could talk to, or something I could express myself to, that I could just say it out loud and it would make me feel better. And I was just open. I was like, whatever, dude, anything that's gonna help me through this with some grace, and so I would sit and I would meditate and I put on really nice music, and it was just a pillar of my early recovery was just sitting in my own thoughts and being very present and still and allowing myself to be open. And same thing with journaling, with social media, with everything that I was doing in early recovery. I made a fucking deal with myself that if I'm gonna do this, I'm going to be the most authentic version of myself that I can be at the time. And eventually I had enough self-esteem and trusted myself in the process enough that with enough practice, with enough help from my therapist, with enough tools and input and data and like whatever, the books I was reading, social media, the connections I was making, the way I was taking care of my body radically and healing myself, that I would heal myself. And I did. And that's awesome. So now I'm sitting here at 2 years sober, so stoked to share the top 8 things that helped me get and stay sober these last 2 years. And I can't wait to share more with you because, this was just off the top of my head, the top things that really made a difference in my life in the past 2 years. So I'm really happy to share them with you, and I hope that they're helpful to you, and I'm linking resources down below. And please subscribe because we'll be talking about all sorts of stuff, not just sobriety, but sex positivity, queerness, mental health, addiction, and yeah, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.